the extreme weather that we've been experiencing in the United States and Canada and around the world is just going to get worse and worse as the years goes on.
As long as it takes, we're going to be with you. The whole country will be with you. You know, we will be respectful of the sacred grounds and the traditions that rebuild the way the people of Maui want to build, not the way others want to build. We're going to rebuild the way the people of Maui want to build.
President Joe Biden visited Maui today in the aftermath of the wildfires that killed more than 100 people. The Maui fires are just one example of the extreme weather ravaging parts of the country right now. Hillary hit parts of California as a tropical storm and delivered historic rainfall. Here's Erin McLaughlin.
Across the Southwest, officials assess the damage. In the Mojave Desert, an 18-wheeler up to its windows in mud. With rainfall records set across the region, Palm Springs narrowly avoiding disaster after the 911 emergency lines temporarily went down, as 50% of their average annual rainfall fell in only 6 hours.
Wow, in only 6 hours, that's a lot of rain. There's nothing anybody can do to like really protect themselves against that besides, just evacuating the city before the storm happens.
Entire neighborhoods blanketed in sludge. Residents evacuated by bulldozers.
The 10 being washed out both directions, that's not a good sign.
And in Washington state, wildfires have forced thousands of people to leave their homes. Here's Jesse Kirsch.
With thousands of people under evacuation orders and dozens of homes destroyed, tonight unpredictable wildfires are testing eastern Washington state.
As I turn 180, it's just from here, it's gone.
Outside Spokane, the Gray Fire devastating multiple communities.
We had about a half an hour, maybe, to get out.
Sandy Hastings and her husband fled their vacation home.
When you saw this for the first time,
Did I cry? Yeah.
Now they're staying in a Red Cross shelter, waiting to see what's left in the rubble.
Can't they just go back to their regular home?
Devastating. With us now to discuss, Dr. Michael Mann, Presidential Distinguished Professor and Director of the Penn Center for Science, Sustainability, and the Media at the University of Pennsylvania, and author of the new book, Our Fragile Moment: How Lessons from Earth's Past Can Help Us Survive the Climate Crisis. It is available September 26th. It seems like this extreme weather, it is now just a fact of life. How do we reckon with that?
Yeah, well, Elisa, it's good to be with you. And unfortunately, we are seeing climate change in all of its guises, in the form of extreme heat, record wildfires, record floods. This is what we predicted decades ago would happen if we continued with business as usual. We continued to burn fossil fuels and generate carbon pollution and warm up the planet. As a climate scientist, the worst thing that can happen is that your predictions come true. And that's what's happening right now. We're seeing it play out in real time.
Yeah, this kind of stuff was predicted when I was in like early middle school, early high school, or late middle school, early high school. All climate change and this kind of stuff was talked about all the time. And yeah, it's now coming to pass.
Professor Mann, you talk about what we can do to mitigate climate change, reducing emissions, for example, but also about how we can adapt to this new normal. Can you explain that piece?
Sure. So, there's a certain amount of climate change that's baked in. We're going to have to contend with this elevated risk that we're now seeing. And we're going to need to find ways to be more resilient, to put in place adaptive measures that can help us minimize the threat, the impact of these extreme weather events, of coastal inundation, of all of the impacts of climate change. But adaptation alone will not be adequate if we continue to warm up the planet. We will exceed our adaptive capacity. So any reasonable strategy has to involve adapting to those changes that are now baked in, that are inevitable, and preventing those additional changes we can. And that's where the good news is, because we now know that if we stop burning fossil fuels and generating carbon pollution, the surface of the planet will stop warming up. Within a matter of a few years. These impacts will stop getting worse. So there's a direct and immediate impact of our efforts to address this problem.
It is good news. It would be better news if we could get our governments there. It would seem to me that there are a series of challenges here, among them climate deniers, but also people who look at these fires, look at these storms, and just feel hopeless in the face of a problem as big as climate change. I wonder what you would say to them.
Yeah, denial used to be the problem. People denying the reality, the impacts of climate change.
Well, you still have people denying what's right in front of their eyes because they get more money, uh, various other means than actually dealing with the climate. Polluting the climate is better for them.
That's just not credible anymore because we can all see it happening. That doesn't mean that the bad actors, that the polluters and the petrostates have given up, but they've turned to other tactics. And ironically, as you allude to, one of those tactics is actually to fan the flames of doomism and despair, because if we truly believe we have no agency, if we believe there's nothing we can do to prevent this problem from getting worse, then it potentially leads us down that same path of disengagement.
Well, for the most part, the average person can't do much to stop the mega corporations from polluting the environment because the politicians allow it to happen.
As outright denial. So we have to be aware of these other tactics that are being used to thwart our efforts to address the problem, because the only obstacles at this point, they're not technological, they're not physical, they are political at this point.
Well, to that point, Professor Mann, I look at the title of your book, Our Fragile Moment, How Lessons from Earth's Past Can Help Us Survive the Climate Crisis. Are those lessons for individuals, or are those lessons for governments and institutions?
Well, both at the same time, because ultimately, we're not going to see policy action without collective action, without people, voting and using their voice to, affect change, to demand change, to hold politicians accountable, to vote out climate deniers and delayers and vote in climate champions. And so, it requires both. And here's really the message that we can draw when we look at
voting really doesn't change anything when you have a bunch of rich people that can just throw money at a politician to change their vote.
Earth's past history, we see examples of stability, of resilience. The climate system has a certain amount of resilience built into it, and we can see episodes and examples of that in the past. But we can also see examples where Earth's climate started to spin out of control. When you hit it hard enough, it can spin out of control. So right now, we're sort of in that in-between area. There's still a margin of error. If we get our act together, if we prevent the warming of the planet from exceeding 2 or 3 degrees Celsius, we can prevent that sort of runaway, catastrophic climate scenario. But, if we fail to act now, then we will truly see catastrophic global scale changes in our climate that will call into question the stability of our civilization. So at this point, it's up to us. There's still a margin of safety. If we act now, we can avert disaster, but we have to act now.
A fragile moment indeed. Michael Mann, thank you so much.